Are you saying Phil Billing isn't a £100 million player?
If he goes there, the game is gone.
You don't want to go without Erling Haaland.
Welcome to Lose to Win, the podcast with myself, Jack.
And me, Josh.
I just wanted to start off with a bit of an introduction about ourselves and our idea for the podcast. So first off, thank you very much for tuning in, whether you've stumbled across us or whether you have been force-fed this by a link by us. So the idea behind the podcast really is to spend a bit of time talking about common interests that myself and Josh have through football. And we actually met through a weight loss football program, and we found a common interest in football. We find ourselves talking about football a lot when we meet each other through various parts of the week playing football and also via message. And we thought, why not get on here and introduce ourselves and start talking to everybody about it. The plan is along the journey to talk to other people that are in the same weight loss program as ourselves to understand what they've done to be successful and how well it's gone and how well it might not be going. Also to get on our coach, who is somebody that we see every week and is super supportive and does actually play a bit of football with us in the week as well. And also talk through the positives and the negatives around trying to lose a bit of weight. We also intend on talking a lot of football, so talking about the week's football in headlines, talking a bit of fantasy football, which is Josh's domain very much. I've got my notepad ready to take some notes and try and beat him this year on that, and really kind of go through all the football in headlines and fantasy football tips and tricks that we can kind of talk about and spend a bit of time with. So, an introduction to myself: I'm Jack. I'm 33. I play football. I've played football for a long time and got myself into a position that I'm not enjoying football as much as I used to because of my weight and my fitness, and found the football weight loss program we both partake in, and haven't really looked back since. Really working hard to shift the pounds and also get back to a point where I really enjoy playing football. And what about yourself, Josh?
So I'm Josh, I'm 31, and I kind of a similar thing really. I've been around football my entire life. My dad was huge football fan, absolutely huge. I've got photos of myself when I was 2 years old kicking a football around, with him, my granddad. So that has been a bit of my entire life really until I went to university and I really kind of dropped off. One of these things I just didn't get involved in, and I kind of lost my not passion for it, but I'd see myself not paying quite as much attention. I was quite sedentary. I wasn't really getting out there. But getting involved in this kind of football league program, I've just it's completely skyrocketed my passion again. I was already getting involved in some 5-7-a-side games beforehand, but my fitness was a real issue. I'd run for 5 minutes and that was it being done kind of for the day. But it's huge for me to get involved in. And as I said, I haven't looked back. I've been playing, several nights a week, every week since then, and it's been about 8 months for me now. I think, isn't it roughly, Jack? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I completely echo what you say, and I think what we've done, especially you and I, have built a bit of a community around the people that we play with, and a certain tight knit group of friends, but also everybody. There's nobody that we don't get on with at all. It's such a good group of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Passion certainly flares up on some occasions, but the passion is the right type of passion, isn't it? I think it's people wanting to win and
Oh
wanting to
yeah.
do well.
I think I said this the other week to someone actually in the league. I don't think I've met a group of people I've played football with who are so, I guess the word wholesome is about it, so encouraging of other people when you play.
Yeah.
I used to be, obviously there used to be a lot of shouting on a football pitch. There's usually a lot of that, but it was more of a criticism essentially. It used to be when I was doing 11 aside when I was younger. Nowadays it's just a lot of kind of patting people on the back and a lot of well dones and good tackles and all this kind of stuff. So it's brilliant, and I love the community and the football I play because of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. One thing I forgot to mention and kind of give an overview of is the lose to win headline for it. So obviously with a weight loss program, the idea is to lose weight, and the league that we partake in is really the idea is the more you lose, the more you're going to win as a team. You support and give your team extra goals off the pitch when you hit certain milestones for losing weight and hit 3 weight loss weeks in a row, and even get down to the kind of like the magical oracle area that you and I are heading towards, hopefully, is the maintenance. So we do play with a couple of lads that incredibly are at a point where they have got themselves to a healthy BMI from an unhealthy BMI, and are now aiming to maintain that and keep that at a healthy place. And that is just one thing that we'll certainly come across over the weeks, where I plan on getting in one of the lads in particular that is super impressive, a very young lad that's joined us, and that's as I say, super impressive, and a real inspiration for all of us that are involved. So
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
yeah.
It's the
So,
great thing. I see people every week get on the scales, lose weight, and I think to myself, it's just brilliant. I look at people, I don't know, I just can't help but smile. And but I think that's partly because of the people who are involved. You see them going through a journey,
yeah,
and then when you see the results as well, it's just I just can't help but smile. It's I love it.
yeah. It'd definitely be a lot harder if everybody was an arsehole, wouldn't it? Just wouldn't work. I
Yeah,
think the
yeah.
fact that, like you say, people pat each other on the back. The beauty of it is that when we're playing, it can get over passionate and overheated. But I think if you starve, what is it, 12 fat lads for a week, inevitably that Friday night before they get a chance to eat, they're probably at their point ready to ready to explode. But it's all, everybody shakes hands after. It's so good, and nobody wants to walk away with an injury. Nobody wants to not be able to go to work Monday morning or Saturday morning in some cases, and that's really important as well. So it's all done in the right spirit. It's all done for the right reason, and I'm so glad I found it, because I got to a point where I was playing football with my brother-in-law and his friends, and I got to a point where I couldn't keep up. And I'm 10 years younger than them, and that for me was blowing my mind, and I just didn't want to be in that place anymore. So a bit of a godsend, a bit of a right time, right place for it to land. And I've done it since the inception of Man Through Fat Bournemouth. I was there for the first session. I was there when Dan Lloyd was setting up sessions down at Merritt Park, and I think people I can remember there being Matt Clist, Bill, Luke Cage, a few others, and it was super supportive, knowing straight away this is while the league was waiting to be set up. We kind of got an email saying this is going to happen. We're very close. These are the names. Introduce yourself. And from that point, Dan Lloyd, being Dan Lloyd and the super organizer that he is, was like, should we just get a kickabout going and go from there? And like you say, I've not looked back since.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I have to thank my friend Jet for getting me involved,
Oh
because
yeah, what a
I was
guy.
doing Wednesday nights with him and a few
Mm,
others I knew, just getting back into it, just playing a game I love. And he introduced me when you were low on numbers one Tuesday, and
yeah.
and then I was approached by Coach Steve, and that was it. It was done. I didn't even know it was a weight loss league at the time. I want to play more football, and
Yeah.
these lads seem like they're brilliant, people. So
Yeah.
I got involved, was signed up on a team. First week of the season, turn up. It's like, oh, step on the scales, will you please? I'm like, what? Don't even know what this is.
Yeah.
But actually, that was a godsend, absolute godsend, the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Because not only did it hold me accountable, but I could also tell just after week one what what it means to everyone, and I just loved it. So
Yeah.
special thanks to Jet for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And you're very lucky. We had a few um, call them iffy coaches before Steve, and he's awesome, and he's a big reason why I keep coming back. He's super supportive and
Yeah,
always there. And like
totally
I
agree.
say, he gets involved on a Tuesday night, and he can certainly hold his own. And he always makes sure he's got his son Peter on the same team, just to make sure that he really drives home that advantage. And so yeah, it is. And one thing, going off on a little tangent, one thing that I'm really conscious of and hoping that I could personally add, if anything, to this, is to kind of get rid of the stigma of the fat lads football, because my impression of it, and I guess it's part of my self development and understanding, is that I thought that it would be guys that are considerably bigger than myself and considerably bigger than anybody that plays within the group. And I thought, I'm not there. Surely I'm not there. But breaking down that stigma in my head and going, do it for the right reasons, do it for the kids, and do it for your health. It makes such a difference. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think we've summed it up pretty well. And like I say, the idea behind the pod for everybody is that we'll talk about these things. We'll talk about the mental health side of things, because I certainly struggle at times. If I've had a bad week, it can hit me quite hard. But then have a good week and you're on cloud nine, aren't you? You're riding really high. So it's about finding that good balance of a bad week doesn't mean game over, and a good week doesn't
Yeah.
mean that everything's going to be easy from there. I think that's probably the easiest way to sum it
Yeah,
up.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, plenty of people in the league all struggle with the same thing. You know,
Mm,
a lot of people, maybe it's just an attitude towards food that they've always had an issue with. That's my biggest problem. My family are just constant eaters and not very good food, and I have to try and get out of that habit in my own way. But the support of the community is really helpful because a lot of people are under the same stress. Everyone's got their own thing in their own lives that causes them stress, and that's usually the big kind of predicator to potentially eating poorly or not getting enough, getting out and exercising, etc., etc. And the
yeah,
more we rally around each other, the better it's going to be for everyone. And so I'm
yeah,
hoping this podcast can really shed a light on that
yeah.
and help others kind of feel that they can contribute.
Yeah, definitely. And from a completely selfish point of view, it's a safe space that I can talk and
Yeah,
hopefully put some demons behind me around eating habits and how that week's been, and almost selfishly using it as a bit of like a self-care, bit of therapy to help with that. And I know that for me, diet, everything is in my head. I know I can do it. I know how to do it. I know what I need to do and how to exercise. I can exercise. It's about picking yourself up and doing that, isn't it?
yeah,
And continuously going again, going again, going again,
yeah.
starting the
Uh,
week again.
I would say I'm in the same position. You know,
Yeah,
I've done it before. I've lost the weight before. Just like many people, I've lost the weight I put into the effort for such a year's period or whatever it was at the time that I needed. Obviously, it went the other way and it got even worse, so it needs even more time now to go back the other way.
yeah,
But it's just an attitude thing. Anyway, I
definitely.
actually wanted to quickly move on because the one thing I did think we haven't done is who do you support as a team? Because that's going
Good
to come
point.
up.
Yeah, it's going to come up a lot. So I am an Arsenal fan for my sins. Outside of the last season, I would say that I'm a suffering Arsenal fan for the what was it 19 years since we've won the league since, or whatever that works out as. Um, and I find that my relationship with football is I am an absolute lover of live football, actually physically going to football. So I get the opportunity to go and see Bournemouth quite a lot through my brother's relationship with the club, and through the ability to get tickets myself. Um, but also I go to Arsenal quite a lot as well. I was lucky enough to get to 4 home games last season, in the league, and 3 of the Europa League games. I was there for the incredible 3-2 win against Bournemouth, but with my son for his first ever trip to the Emirates, and we were in the Bournemouth end. So that was difficult. I
Hiding
had
away. No, no,
hiding
no.
away. Absolutely, I had a foot in both camps, and I always want Bournemouth to do well, and I will always want Bournemouth to do well. But at that moment in time, I needed Arsenal to win. It was such a crucial moment in the season and a crucial part. But not being able to celebrate with your son in his first ever trip to the Emirates because you can't get a ticket in home and for love nor money was mental. So the moment we stepped outside of the stadium, I had to be very careful because I was with him. The last thing I want to do is upset anybody around us by celebrating at the wrong time. And he's only 10, but he understood the importance of not celebrating and not overdoing it. But the moment we got outside the stadium and we were amongst the Arsenal fans, we had a moment, and I had to say to him, "Not every game's going to be like that, bud. No, I can't guarantee it's going to be that exciting every time. Well enough
Yeah,
thinking about it, just like that moment, thinking that's your first experience of he goes to Bournemouth a lot. And again, no disrespect to Bournemouth, but it's not a 60,000 seat stadium in the middle of London. It's your local club. But
yeah.
with going to Arsenal and experiencing that noise, that atmosphere, that setup, everything, he was blown away. He walked in and didn't know where to look. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's that's a long answer to a short question. Yeah, I'm an Arsenal fan, but I think like you, I'm sure you're going to confirm in a moment, have a very soft spot for Bournemouth.
Well, it's funny you should say it. I've got a similar story, so I should really say before we lose listeners, because this is where thing is that I am kind of a split fan. Guess you could say a plastic fan. It's not really. I was brought up with Man United,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah, my dad is a massive Man United fan, and that's all it was until I was a teenager and beyond. And so I obviously follow Manchester United quite closely. Um, but in doing so, as a living down here and wanting, like you, to go and see much live football, when Bournemouth were in League Two, and I was going to home games as much as I could to see Bournemouth live, and that grows. You want to support your local team,
Yeah.
as you do. That's how it comes. So I'm kind of equal parts Manchester United fan and Bournemouth fan. The Bournemouth things come from just being local and growing up around it. Well, I say growing up, wrapping my head around it when I got older and was like, nope, I need to support my local team and just following them more. And Manchester United's really from my dad. And I've got a similar story in theory actually, because one of my dad's birthday, he works abroad a lot and he never gets around here too much. So I managed to get us tickets to go to see Man United Bournemouth at Old Trafford. Okay, away end.
Hmm.
So I was like, don't wear your Man United shirt. But he loved it. I was the best thing I could do for him. I felt at the time for his birthday. I was like, we're going to go up there. I'm going to obviously spend silly money on whatever the tickets and travel to get up there. And
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite live experiences was getting to take my dad to see his team. That was actually one of the games. I think it was
It wasn't the
Ibrahimovic
bomb
got
scare
sent.
one, was it?
Uh, no, it was Ibrahimovic. He got
Oh, and
sent off for
Mings.
a red card, 1-1 draw in the end.
Yeah, yeah, his little battle with
Sent
Mings.
off.
I remember it well.
That was right in the corner in front of us
Did
at
Artur
the
Boruc
time.
save a penalty in that game? Or am I imagining
I can't honestly. Sounds bad. I can't remember,
it?
but
I'll have to look
I
now.
do
That'll bug me.
remember my dad, a lifelong Man United fan, seeing that red car moment in the corner, and he was effing and blinding at the Man United players because he's in the Bournemouth away end and he gets sucked up into it, and he's lived around here his whole life as well. So it's
Yeah.
quite an interesting one, but yeah. So that's me, a Manchester United slash Bournemouth fan. So don't hate me. Don't hate me.
I get a lot of abuse for that, mate. Don't worry, and I'm sure people will pipe up. My boss calls me Tommy Two Teams, but he supports Peterborough, so I know I prefer to support two teams and support that rubbish. I don't know if he'll ever listen to this, but that's probably me getting the sack. Um, cool. Okay. So yeah, that's a great point, mate. Good idea bringing that up. That's one thing that I did forget to mention, and like you say, we are very similar in that sense. Inevitably, with a surname like mine and a history of a one Jamie Hayter, or James Hayter is his actual name is often synonymous. And I used to wear a Hayter shirt when I went to Bournemouth games, and even when he was gone, people were like, he's not the club anymore. I'm like, yeah, no, it's my surname. I'm like, oh, okay, fair enough. That was quite a funny one. Um, one thing I wanted to, one of the topics I wanted to go on to, and this bit is a bit of a free for all at the moment, whilst there is no proper football. I don't consider pre-seasons proper football until we win, like we did against Barcelona last night. It's kind of like the week's football in headlines. So I want to talk about some transfers, some pre-season results, rumored transfers, manager departures, a bit of everything with this. Really moving away from the fat lads football to to the professional game, and understanding and having conversations about our opinions and what's happened this week and what we think about it. So, um, did you want to start with some of the headlines that
Well,
you've gathered?
yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest footballing headline for transfer speculation, it's obviously not done, is the Mbappe
Mm.
to Saudi for 300 million euros or whatever it would be. Well, I don't know what your thoughts are on it. I know it's not a done deal, and it's very unlikely he's actually going to go
Yeah.
to Saudi, but it does seem just. And I'm sure we'll get onto more Saudi-related deals, but
No doubt.
it's another kind of. It's just such a strange thing about PSG and Mbappe, and how he seems to have huge control over what he wants to do. I just
Huge
wanted to get your
control and
opinion on.
a really fragmented relationship with them as well by all accounts. I think, and I know we
It's
are.
it's strange for a Parisian footballer, I guess, who
Yeah.
never really wanted to sign for PSG in the first place, which was the impression I generally get from
Oh
the
yeah, he's always
whole
had his eyes
situation.
set on Madrid, really, isn't he? I
Well, he
think
set
that's
set
the end
from when
goal.
he was leaving Monaco.
Yeah.
He didn't want to necessarily go to PSG. He
Yeah.
just knows if he goes to PSG, his hometown team, that he's likely going to be winning trophies every season.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's it. I can't comment on what his mentality is, but there's always been that whole thing about wanting to join Real Madrid, and I guess now is a what's he going to do to engineer that?
Yeah.
This Saudi offer of 300 million euros in theory is supposed to be a 1 year deal, and say we're going to
Incredible.
give you we're going to give you up to 700 million that's the year to
Yeah.
stay for 1 year. Oh yeah, and then when Real Madrid come in next year, we'll let you go.
But
It's
you've got to think
essentially.
about what the Saudis are going to want from Madrid transfer wise. Unless
Well,
he goes
yeah.
as a free. If you're saying it's only a 1 year contract,
Well, I
then
don't. I can't. I
he
don't
goes
know
for
if it would be a
nothing.
1 year contract. I maybe I'm a bit incorrect there, but
Yeah.
I was hearing that it would be a 2 or 3 year deal. So 300 million euro fee, 2 or 3 year deal, and I think it's 200 million net base salary a year. And the idea is that if he wanted to go to Real Madrid next year, they would let him, but they would want to recoup some of the money. Now, some of the money is, I mean,
Yeah,
it's going
that's
to be
an
less. It's going
interesting
to be
point, isn't it?
yeah, less than 50%. I would have thought
You'd hope
of the
so, yeah.
money they put in. So it's a way for Saudi to get him for 1 year and let him do what he wants to do next year anyway. So instead of staying at PSG for a year under the cloud he's got there, he gets to go to Saudi for a year, earn more money than you can think of, and then still get what he wants.
Yeah. I think if they want to do that, surely the better route is to negotiate a loan fee with PSG. Let PSG extend Mbappe's contract for another year now. Let him go on loan for a year, and then PSG will get whatever Real Madrid and they agree at the end of his year-long loan to Saudi. I don't know how their season start dates and finish dates. Admittedly, I couldn't even tell you one of the teams. Maybe
Well, so that's what we're
El
going to.
Atifak or something like
Yeah,
that. I
yeah.
think
So
there's a
I've got.
few. Go
Yeah.
on.
So that's Al Hilal, who put the offer in for
Right.
Mbappe.
Okay.
I know it's been rejected. I know that, well, PSG haven't rejected it, but I'm pretty certain Mbappe has,
Yeah.
which is why he's still ongoing. Then we've got people. So this brings us on to another one. So the whole idea about Mitrovic going to Saudi as well. I can't remember the team, but
Just very quickly on the Mbappe thing, and I think your question at the beginning, and I've got a very straight answer about what I think about it. I think if he goes there, the game is gone. I think it's mental that somebody I would consider him and Haaland as the hottest prospects or the best players in the world at the moment. If he goes there, then who else? That is the
yeah,
floodgate. But
I,
I
I under,
genuinely don't think he will go there.
no, I don't think he will. I don't think he wants to go there. I think the only way he will go there, I mean, the only way he'll go there is if he has no other choice to get away from PSG.
Yeah,
Zero other choices. Um, I mean, that offer PSG. I mean, what are they going to turn around and say? I mean, in theory, they've got some control over selling him now, don't they? If
they
they turn
do.
around and say,
Yeah,
well, so if Real Madrid say, oh, we can't give him 300 million euros, which they're not going to be able to do, they say, oh, we'll give you 150, 200 million euros for him.
yeah,
PSG have every right to say no. We want a Saudi deal, surely.
yeah.
I
Oh,
don't know. Maybe Mbappe has enough power. He just goes, no, if you want to sell me, I'm not going to Saudi. I will only go to Real Madrid, and therefore you have to accept whatever they're offering.
I think inevitably you're right. Yeah, I think he probably does, and I think most players probably do, because what you don't want, and you see it all the time on a lot smaller scale, is players that don't want to play for their clubs becomes very obvious. I think a good example of that. I don't know if you remember the deal, but one thing I hate is when the season starts and the transfer window is still open. And Sami Nasri for Arsenal was a prime example before he went to City. We kept playing him. Wenger kept playing him, and you could see he
Yeah,
had no interest of being there. He was protecting himself. He was making sure he's not getting injured, and that's what I mean by protecting himself. Not putting the effort in and still getting 90 minutes. And at that time, Arsenal were in a pretty poor state and pretty desperate for anybody to play that was half decent. And that is the player power. We knew he was going to go. It kept being played, and he ended up going 4 games into the season, I think it ended up being, or something crazy. And then you're left on the 11th hour trying to sign somebody of equal quality of
yeah,
the similar sort of money. And it happens. And there's a prime example. Another example of somebody that you well know in terms of your Bournemouth interest is what Ryan Fraser did to Bournemouth.
yeah,
With the COVID situation, he had the opportunity to extend his contract to help Bournemouth to try and keep him in the league. And
yeah,
what did the little prick end up doing? Leaving Bournemouth high and dry. I saw him
yeah,
running on Instagram doing his training on Whitecliffe Park down in Sandbanks whilst Bournemouth are playing. I
yeah,
I don't get it. I don't get it, and that's where that player power comes in, and that's where that greed. You're paying young. Inevitably, what we're doing at the end of the day is paying young men that haven't really had much life around, that isn't around football, and isn't around their dream of becoming a footballer and earning lots of money, a lot of money, and they are at the end of the day very young men that will behave in a certain way.
yeah. I think so. We'll come back to it, and we'll move on to another one I know you're really keen to discuss. So Jordan Henderson is a done deal, it seems,
Right.
over to
Yeah.
Saudi, to Al Ettifaq.
Okay. That's another name
What?
I write down. There's another team I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. It'll join Steven Gerrard. So
Yeah.
what was it? 15 million a deal. 15 million, I
I
think it
think
was
so.
the
Yeah.
deal. 700k a week. Is that
Nice if you can get
correct?
it. Eh?
It's about right. I think it seems right. I mean, I know you've got opinions on this, but this is another example. I guess this ties in with the whole thing about Saudi. I know you said about the game's gone if Mbappe goes. I'm of the thought that while it seems it's kind of shocking that Saudi are just pumping money into trying to get players from the Premier League, but if you think about it, the Premier League have done the same thing for years before to
Oh yeah.
other leagues in Europe,
Yeah.
and so there can't really be any. It's hard to, if Saudi ends up with the money they've got, they could end up being as big as the Premier League in
Yeah.
the world, in the
Oh,
next decade
absolutely.
or
And
so.
that's their
And
plan.
and then and then it feels a little bit different if, say, Mbappe wants to go and play in the Saudi league. If that essentially ends up being in terms of quality, the biggest league in the world. Obviously, nowhere near that at the moment, but they are attracting a lot of players, and that brings us back to Jordan Henderson. I know
Mm.
that's a different thing because he's towards the end of his career,
Yeah.
but I know you've got some opinions on this one in
Yeah.
particular.
So just thinking about it, if you're comparing what Messi's done going to the States, and you compare what Jordan Henderson has done going to Saudi, inevitably what they've done is same. What the US won't do is pay Messi the incredible wages, but what they've done is made him loads of promises around shirt sales, around Apple. I think every time somebody subscribes to Apple TV, he gets a percentage. All of these crazy things. A lot of the teams in the league paid towards him coming and have agreed towards him coming. I don't have an issue with that, but I have an issue with Henderson moving to Saudi, and it may sound hypocritical, and if I can just explain why I have an issue, is that the human rights side of things and the issues that they have in Saudi are not hidden by any means. And I know America have guns, and I know America have their own problems, but I think in terms of their civilization and where they are ethically, I think they're a million miles ahead than where
Yeah,
Saudi are. I think Jordan Henderson is going into a relatively unknown. The only thing I think he really knows is that his mate Stevie G's going to be his manager, and I'm sure he's had a big part in persuading him
Yeah,
to
I mean,
move.
he must have done. He must have
Oh,
done,
yeah.
surely, because in my mind, and I know this sounds ridiculous, but it makes me laugh thinking about Jordan Henderson and Steven Gerrard trying to speak Arabic.
Oh my God.
I I know that sounds strange, but what I mean to say is it doesn't strike me as the kind of thing that either of them would have chosen to do unless they felt either they had no other option or they weren't in it together on some
Mm,
level, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
Did you see the
I don't
video
know.
of Stevie G's one of his training sessions where
No,
he's
I didn't actually. I have
Oh, I'll have
heard.
to send it to you. So he's screaming at somebody about communication, and I mean, I met him in a hotel lobby once, and he was absolutely lovely, to be fair, and really kind to take a photo for with me. Um, but he's like chronically Scouse, isn't he? Like there's no,
Yeah,
it's not like part Scouse or pretend to put it on. He's so thick with his Scouse accent, and fair play to him. It is what it is. But I think if you're speaking not the Queen's English or the King's English, but if you're speaking from necessarily where we're from, the likelihood is they're going to understand us a little bit better than they are him, and especially if he's at the top of his squeaky voice and giving it the beans with that. I think that makes a difference for me, really.
yeah. I don't doubt his dedication to learning Arabic, by the way, and the same with Jordan Henderson. I don't doubt that they won't put all the effort in possible to make that easier, and I don't doubt they couldn't do it. It's more just the thought of it in my head just seems a little strange. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it is because they're Scouse and they just oh Jordan has not, but you know what I mean because of the it just seems a little strange to me. I think it's
Yeah.
just come a little bit out of the blue. To me, I've always felt like Jordan Henderson would stay at Liverpool for the rest of his career,
They must
knowing
have a
that
plan. They
yeah,
must
knowing
have.
that
He must have got the nod that, especially with England as well. I think he's got to be in a place that Southgate's probably saying,
but,
if you look at who we've got, I'm not sure you're going to get as much game time as you want or you think you're going to get.
yeah, but you can say that with Jordan Henderson, but not Harry Maguire, and we'll
That's
get
true.
to that, we'll come to that another day, I'm sure. But I just, you know, to me, he feels like he would offer more to Liverpool in the dressing room.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. Yeah.
I could be wrong, but
I think what
I
you'll
felt
see
like
is,
he would have accepted that role. You
yeah.
know, maybe this is proof that he wouldn't accept that role, but he just to me, I felt like that's the kind of role he would have accepted, knowing
Yeah.
that he's towards. I mean, he wasn't playing super regularly last season, was he? But
Do you know what? I didn't pay enough attention to it I think based on some injuries, I know that Thiago Alcantara was out quite regularly, and granted they're very different players, but fill a similar hole. Fabinho, I think, is their stalwart, and again another player that is looking like he's going to be on that plane to Saudi as well. I think they've got a chartered plane from England every other day at the moment to take the Premier League players or the Premier League has-beens over. But yeah, I think you mentioned, I did cut across you. You mentioned the Mitrovic situation, and I think Mitrovic is I would say well, I know he's considerably younger than Henderson. Was he 28? I think, um, and I think that he is the type of player that if you were to go, here's a list of 10 players, on there is on there is your loyal players and your kind of like club legends and situations. I wouldn't have picked Henderson to be on the plane, but I'd definitely pick Mitrovic. The way that he
yeah,
comes across, the way that he seems, his arrogance, his behaviour, everything like that, I think it all points towards somebody that would go, I wouldn't play football if I didn't have to.
yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah, that's weird because things like you say that it's a good example. It's strange. So I've got it's noted like N'Golo Kante as another example. He's not the kind of person I would expect
No,
to
that's
go to
fair.
Saudi.
Yeah, yeah. You're
You know,
proving my point wrong. Yeah, he's another one. I definitely wouldn't have
like
expected
for
that.
example. But
Who
I
else?
don't know if it's that. I completely understand what you're saying though. Mitrovic is the kind of person I would expect to go. I
Yeah.
don't think, say for example, Ruben Neves, people necessarily thought he would go.
No.
He's in his prime. He's
Wasn't he
still a
linked with
great player.
Barca as well? And teams, I think bar probably top three, maybe four. I think he walks into any team in the Premier League,
Yeah.
or is at least a pretty regular player in
Oh,
in
he would walk into
most
Man
teams.
United's midfield. I
Oh,
think.
what a midfield that would be. It'd be the
I mean,
slowest midfield, but it'd be.
well, no, you'll have. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, you'd have too many players then, really. You've got
Mm,
Mount, Fernandez, and Casemiro. Well, we thought it's midfield three, but Ruben Neves would definitely. So it's just a. He'd almost be a replacement for Casemiro when he got suspended,
yeah.
which is obviously going to happen probably. So
Wolves are in a bit of trouble, aren't they? Because they've lost Jimenez to Fulham, which
yeah,
tells you that it sounds like Mitrovic is gone if they're
yeah,
getting a striker. That was an interesting one. I looked and that was just shy of 6.5 million, and I can't think of anything that he's done since that horror head injury with David Luiz against Arsenal. I think he just came back a different player. I'm sure he was out for nearly a whole season with a
yeah,
fractured
it
skull and
was,
all the
yeah.
recovery that's around it. But
But
good money if you get it for Wolves, but they're looking in trouble.
yeah, I mean, yes, they do. It's funny because without Mitrovic, I would have said Fulham look in trouble as well. I know that sounds
Yeah, and
maybe
at one
strange
point,
considering the season they had their last year, but um,
William was out the door, wasn't he? But he ended
yeah,
up staying.
they struggled with that Mitrovic. So it'll be interesting for both those teams to see how well they
Yeah,
do. But Raul Jimenez obviously not the same level as Mitrovic, at least
no,
not recently. I'd be interested to see what they can do. And for them as well, it's huge. Marcus Silva's staying huge.
oh yeah,
Like
because he's turned
like
Saudi down, hasn't it?
yeah, exactly. Um, and so that's massive, and I'd be interested to see what they can do with him. So
I'm gonna
that's
make
another
myself a
one.
little Saudi bingo card. Every time I mention Saudi, I'm gonna get a tick on
I
my little
think
bingo
yeah,
card.
you're going to be doing that for the rest of the transfer window, I'm sure.
Hopefully
So
not. I hope I can't wait for the season to start and us to have something else to really pay some attention to because
so we've got one that kind of links another Saudi thing. So Harvey Barnes gone to Newcastle
it's
for
a lot of money, that
38.
isn't it?
Yeah, 38 million pounds. So I think it was at 45 million euros, something like that.
Yeah,
I actually think that's okay. It's quite a bit of money. You think James Maddison went to Spurs for 40 million,
yeah,
and Barnes basically went for the same money, the same place. So I would say Maddison's probably a better player, but I'm completely open to the idea that Harvey Barnes could be brilliant. It does seem a little strange to me because they did get
yeah,
Gordon last season for the same money, 40 million or so. So, but the
yeah.
idea is, I guess, to fill in squad roles because St. Maximum's going to Al Ali, I think it
Ding
is,
ding ding ding
over in
ding. I feel
Saudi.
I call it a line. That's four Saudis
Ali,
in.
Ali, okay.
That's a line. I've got a line. What do I get for a line? Court a percentage of Jordan Henderson's wage would be more than enough. Um, yeah, you're right. And what's interesting about the St. Maximum one, again, I'm only going off what I read and what I see, is that I think they're a PIF owned club that he's going to,
Yeah,
which is the same as Newcastle.
yeah,
And I know that there was always going to be at some point when are Newcastle going to start offloading players to their other PIF owned
yeah.
clubs to
The,
help
the
with the
the only
financial
thing
fair
I will
play.
say on this is that I completely get that thought, but the one thing I didn't like about this story was that I felt it was pretty unfair, and you may have another opinion to me on this one, that people were clamoring for to basically suggest that St. Maximum's price was inflated.
Oh my
I
god,
think
it's it's really low, isn't it?
I thought it was like 30 million or something like that, and I thought to myself, well, if Harvey Barnes is going for 38 million
Yeah,
and they've just been relegated,
yeah, right.
you know,
You bang on.
St. Maximum's not a bad player, is he? I mean,
No.
I don't mean no disrespect to Harvey Barnes, but I wouldn't have thought there's any massive difference in
Yeah.
their ability. And St. Maximum is going to go less over to Saudi. So it just felt a bit hypocritical from Premier League clubs. Well, I say hypocritical, it's not the right word, but it just felt a bit unfair on Newcastle. I completely
Yeah.
understand the fear of it. I do. And if they start doing it regularly, it becomes a problem. But
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like it was fair for other clubs to turn around just in the case of Newcastle and St. Maximum
Yeah.
to say, oh, it's inflated.
So Eddie
Because,
has come out and said, hasn't he, that they had before signing anybody. I think there was some irony in what he said. To be honest, before we can sign anybody, we need to balance the books. We need to bring some funds in because how the club was run previously, their ability to be financially correct under financial fair play was fine, because they weren't spending a large amount of money on transfers. They weren't spending a large amount of money on subsequently spending a large amount of money on wages because of the players that they're bringing in. But what they weren't bringing in as a business is a great deal of revenue. That's flipped. They've got loads of revenue, or
Yeah,
potential revenue, sat there waiting to become revenue, and they now have to be able to balance the books with the signings, the transfer costs, and the wages with that income. Again, that's
yeah,
why their sponsorship is their own company, much like Man City have been caught doing, and these loopholes will be continuously found. Um, they're
yeah.
they're now
That,
sponsored by a company that's owned by, I believe anyway, owned by the people that own the club.
yeah. I mean, but we're going to see that. I think my obviously it's concerning to some degree, but it's concerning if, as Man City are under that spotlight for, if it's inflated massively to a point where you can start signing, all the best players in the world. It's I don't think in Newcastle, we're not at that stage at the moment. I wouldn't have thought so.
No.
I think the thing about them is they have the fan base for me, and to be with the money at least to start over the next decade becoming one of the real big powerhouses, a bit like Man City have become.
Yeah,
I
but they
think
need to get their
because
commercial house in order, don't they? And this is what
yeah, yeah,
takes time.
but yeah, but I think that they will have that commercial revenue
Mm.
to challenge because they have some history as well. Unlike Man City, well, I say unlike Man City are going to get there in 20 years or so, but
Yeah,
Newcastle have a history of winning the Premier League,
yeah, absolutely.
So it's not before this investment. Okay, be it right at the start of the Premier League, but it's it is there. So
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a different situation.
there is
Um,
another transfer. Sorry, cut across you. Another transfer that caught my eye, and with our Bournemouth hats on, is the Arnaut Danjuma to Everton.
yeah,
So originally, I think it was, again, he had had a medical at Everton before Spurs showed an interest, and this is only a loan, I must add, from Villarreal. Um, before he, so from my understanding is that he had his medical at Everton, it was all ready to go. He'd even signed documentation, and then Spurs came in and said, "We'll have him instead," and he went there, and the guy has got some front to drop Everton like that, and then sign again from. And I think
it
he
makes
even
me
put
laugh. Yeah,
on Instagram like second time lucky or something. And I think he he didn't endear himself a great deal with the Bournemouth fans. I'm not going to knock him. He was a terrific footballer, and I think he is a good footballer. And he proved that in his time at Villarreal in the Champions League and goals he scored for them in that. But it is a certain character in there, I think, that might
yeah.
get himself a bit of a reputation. I don't think it's worth spending too much time on him, but it's just one thing that definitely caught my eye. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Oh, yeah. It just made me laugh. It made me smile. I just kind of read it and thought, oh, okay, yeah. Doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me. Actually, the funny thing about it is Bournemouth were linked with him earlier
Yeah, I
on this
know.
summer,
I'm
and
glad they
I
didn't get
thought,
him.
yeah, and I thought to myself, he's a great player, but
Too
just,
similar to the Clive,
I don't
Justin
want to mess.
Kluivert, isn't he? I think.
Yeah, I'm
I think
actually
they're
really excited
basically
about him. Actually,
identical
so
players.
yeah, I'm actually really excited about him. People say he can't finish, but we'll see.
I'm off to watch the Bournemouth friendly on Saturday. For the life of me, I can't remember who it's again. It might be Lorient or it might be Atalanta. I can't remember, one of the two. I know that they've got one on Saturday and then one
Atlanta, I
on
believe.
Tuesday. Yeah, so I'm off to see that. And I forgot to mention, actually, I'm off to Wednesday coming. I'm off to the Emirates Cup, which is on Wednesday night because of Arsenal's game against City in the Community Shield.
Yeah,
So I'm very much looking forward to that. It'll be the homecoming for Declan Rice and all all the other players. I'm sure there's going to be a bit of a buzz about the place when I go Wednesday night. So I wanted to take the kids, it being summer holidays and everything work, but they used to do it on a Saturday and they've moved it to a Wednesday, and I just can't. I don't fancy traipsing the kids across London on a Wednesday evening and then back again. It's just not fair. And if it was a Saturday, it would have been a lot easier. And on the subject of Rice, that's obviously
yeah.
a big
I know
one.
you're keen as an Arsenal fan. Come on.
Oh, I'm so happy. I think
Yeah,
what kills me is that I spend far too much time scrolling through TikTok, and a lot of it is football. Outside of people hurting themselves or doing something stupid, it tends to be football stuff that comes up. And one in particular kind of grinded my gears is probably the best term. Is that somebody had put a compilation of passes that Declan Rice had done and was counting the backwards passes he was doing.
All right.
And I sat there and I thought, like, that was his first game for Arsenal, and bear in
Yeah.
mind it's a pre-season, and he hadn't even done any. I think he had one training session before, not giving it any excuse. And when they showed it, I was like, cool, that is a lot of backwards passes, and that is a lot of negative style of football. But
He
when
has played in a West Ham team who
yeah,
who struggled to keep the ball,
you've got
and
it.
so
There's a few
when
points that really sorry to cut across you, but there's some real points that I'm quite passionate about, and the one is that he is going to be going forward a lot more than he is backwards with Arsenal, inevitably
well,
with that
yeah,
team. He's also, I mentioned about one training session before. He's also the poor lad now, like Grealish had for that first season and probably still does, has that £100 million player target on his back. So whenever he is in a situation now and things might get tough, that's always going to be the first thing that's mentioned. Oh, he's £100 million. I can't believe we spent £100 million on him. 105, sorry. I can't believe we've spent that much money on him, whatever. And he, as a player, will inevitably, I'm sure, get to a point where it's kind of a sink or swim moment where I think he'll rise now and he'll become and fulfill potential, or he'll stagnate and stay as a player that will never fulfill that potential. He's not a proven player for me. Granted, he's done very well for West Ham and was highly
yeah,
rated in the Premier League, and a lot of people throw stats around about actually this is how good he was. I saw somebody comparing Phil Billing against him, the amount of goals Phil Billing scored against what Rice scored,
yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
like the different sometimes you have to bang your head against the wall and kind of wonder what people are thinking. But they're different players, they're different situations, and I'm very excited. I don't want to go on too much about it because I'm sure we'll cover our own teams in depth over the weeks coming. But I'm very excited to see how well he does. I'm really excited to see
yeah.
how Arsenal develop. My
Well,
opinion on Kai Havertz is held very much at the moment. I've heard a
yeah,
lot and listened to the Ars blog podcast, and they talk about how good he was at Bayer Leverkusen and the reason why Chelsea signed him in the first place because of the potential. And he in my opinion, he definitely didn't catch my eye at Chelsea. But that being said, I trust wholeheartedly now in Arteta and Edu and their decisions and what they've done. And I just hope he can prove everybody wrong, much like Rice is going to have to.
yeah. But I think that's a similar deal with, say, Mason Mount. You know, last season didn't have a very good season, but he's there was Chelsea Player of the Year for 2 years running before that.
Yeah,
Obviously a good player. Like, no doubt he's a good player. Different atmosphere, different environment, different manager. You can't say that he won't be just as good. And I know that's coming on to Man United. I do want to quickly say, by the way, are you saying, by the way, in comparison with Phil Billing, that Phil Billing isn't a £100 million player? It just
tell me that's not a serious question. Do you know what? Phil Billing,
fortunately for you,
if
it's
we've got
not.
a
But
moment, Phil Billing, I actually love Phil Billing and I
oh,
enjoy
he's brilliant.
watching
I love
him.
him.
But what I love about him, especially when I go with my dad, because my dad is proper old school, and he's like, oh, Phil Billing's had a terrible game, and Phil Billing in that game probably scored one and got 2 assists. He doesn't get an inch from my dad, and it's I think because of his size, he looks like the effort. He does things effortlessly and doesn't kind of make 100% effort. And there's definite games where you come away from a game and you're kind of like, that's Phil Billings' one good game this season. And to be fair, I reckon he probably had about 5 or 6 one good game of the seasons last season. And it does crack me up.
Yeah, I think he had more
My
than
dad's
that.
a stickler for him. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right.
I think he
And
had some. I think he was pretty consistently good most of the season. I think there were some odd games, there always are. But
he
yeah,
scored some
not saying
absolute
that.
worldies as well. Do you remember the one against
Yeah, yeah.
Nottingham Forest?
Oh,
I
yeah.
think and he had a great game against Arsenal actually. That mad one at the Emirates as well. He was probably Bournemouth's man of the match. But yeah,
Anyway,
he is a
we
funny one.
will we'll come on to Bournemouth another time because I'm
Yeah,
excited about
definitely.
I'm definitely really excited about the prospects for the season. We'll see. Um, I don't know if there were any other transfers you wanted to go through. I have a few things. No, I mean, the West Ham bid for Conor Gallagher is one of these things. 40 million, by the way, that was rejected by Chelsea.
What do
And
they want? What do they expect?
well, I just find it. Well, like I think he's one of only two remaining midfielders they have on the books at Chelsea.
Well,
Enzo Fernandez and Conor Gallagher are the only two midfielders I think registered for
so do you
first team.
think they're not taking it because of the
No, I
personnel, not
still,
because of the price?
yeah, I think 40 millions easily enough in
Yeah,
my
I
mind
agree.
for Conor Gallagher. I don't say Conor Gallagher's not a bad player. I just think,
The
I mean,
poor West Ham though, and I don't say that lightly because I'm not the biggest
yeah,
fan of West Ham, but they are now in the situation that they've got the, as everybody's calling it, the rice tax, haven't they? That
yeah,
whenever
people know
they're
they
going to
have
come anywhere
money.
near it, they're going to go,
Yeah,
"You've got 100 million burning in your pocket there, mate. Try chucking another 20% on what you think you're going to pay us for it."
yeah.
Because I think they've gone for, or keep getting linked with Ward-Prowse as well, don't they?
Well, yeah, this is the thing I want to come on to. So we're talking about potentially Ward-Prowse. I'm surprised he hasn't gone already, if I'm really honest, and I'm surprised I haven't heard more rumours about other teams going for him. I think he could still do a really good job for almost all Premier League teams. Obviously, there's a few teams he would struggle to get in the midfield for, but
Do you know what and
then you've got Romeo Lavia as well,
yeah, yeah, he played the other
who's like a
night against
brilliant,
Bournemouth actually.
yeah, who's been in heart was a speculation to go to Liverpool, I think it
I
was.
think that will happen now that they've got their
Hey,
Henderson money.
that's going to be a midfield again, isn't it? They've really, really changed it around. Although it's strange because they'll have Lavia, Szoboszlai, and McAllister, but then they're also looking to play Trent in the midfield
And Thiago.
and Thiago. I mean, after me, I don't know the full Liverpool squad,
No.
but
Curtis Jones, I think, plays. My Jordan's going to kill me. You obviously know Jordy's going to kill me for not knowing him. Funnily enough, yeah, we booked. I'm going up to Liverpool to see Bournemouth against Liverpool on the 19th of August, I
oh,
think it
very
is.
nice. Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think Liverpool are definitely going to be contenders. How they finished that last season, again, there's loads that we go off on a tangent, but very quickly, I think Liverpool, if they get Lavia, if granted by the sounds of it, Fabinho's going to go, Henderson's gone. I think if they can get Lavia, maybe one other into that centre mid, um, the chap that you mentioned, I can't pronounce his name. By all accounts,
Szoboszlai.
is
Yeah.
that's the guy. Yeah, I just leave that to you. That one. Um, he looks an absolute player, and I think
Yeah.
I think he's got an absolute wand on him as well. No doubt it'll be a left foot. All players with left foots have got wands, to be fair. Um, but I think
You
he's.
say that as a lefty, don't you? Just
I
yeah,
was wondering if you picked up on that. Absolutely, I did.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's all I've got, mate. That's all I've got left. Um, so yeah, I think Liverpool are certainly ones to watch with it, and there's there's lots of the transfer window left, and I think we'll spend a lot of time talking about who they're going to be linked with now that they've offloaded their captain. I messaged Jordan earlier going, who do you think the captain will be? And by the time I'd messaged it, I kind of gone, oh, Van Dijk. So that was my next message to him. And he goes, yeah, probably will be, which makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. He's a leader, maybe Allison, I think probably is a contender in there. Trent maybe just being a Liverpudlian as well, but
Yeah,
we shall
interesting.
see. If you're happy, I'm pretty happy as a roundup there with that. One thing I wanted to do, and as I alluded to in the intro, is hand you the floor, get my pen and paper ready, and you tell me how I'm going to beat you at fantasy football this year.
Well, I don't know if you will, if I'm honest.
You're going to throw a load of
um,
curveballs in and pretend this is what you're
no.
doing.
So, I mean, I'm an avid fantasy football player. Have been for several seasons. I can't turn around and tell you that I've been really successful for years doing it, but I'm well studied, I would say. I think it's probably the term.
Yeah.
It's kind of, but if anyone knows football to some extent, you know fantasy football
Yeah.
because as it's so intrinsically linked to what players do on the pitch, you can get an idea. So you don't have to think too hard, really, I would
Mm.
say. And this comes on to kind of like I wanted to just to run through some 5 general tips for for playing fantasy football. I know these can be basic to some, to others they might not be, but
Perfect.
it's some of the things that what I have done more of in order to be more successful playing it. I think first things first, we'll say practice patience. I know that sounds extremely basic, but I find, and I did this a lot at the start. So a lot of FBL managers don't give their picks enough time to start scoring points. There tends to be this habit of knee jerking a player in and out. So, for
Mate, you've
example,
just described me perfectly. That's
so
exactly what I did.
yeah, so you just sit there and let's just say, hopefully, as an example, you've got Mohamed Salah in your team. He's an expensive player in the game, 12.5 million in the midfielder. He's a premium player. So you're looking for premium results almost instantly.
Yeah.
And if, for example, he doesn't do that week one, you'd be like, oh, who am I going to replace him with? What am I going to do? And that tends to be the general knee jerk. I used to do that a lot when I started. I mean, a lot. Um, and it caused me many issues because what you end up doing is you end up spending those transfers, which are extremely valuable, and also then the minus points it costs to go over your transfer budget, so or
Yeah.
your transfer limit essentially. And that's the last thing you want to do because then you end up 4 8 points behind your competition every week going into it. And inevitably, because you're thinking short term, week to week, you're not gaining those points back immediately.
So am I right in thinking you're saying don't ever do a transfer outside of your free transfers?
No, there are times where it's warranted.
Okay.
So for example, if you've got double game weeks coming up, we know there'll be postponements later on. It's usually the second half of the season this matters most to. But if FA Cup fixtures come up and it means that a fixture's rearranged, you could have, for example, Man City playing Burnley at home and Luton at home in
Right.
the same game week. I mean, like the dream. So you might only have one Man City player in your team for that week. You don't, for for the purposes of taking a -4 hit, you can not always, but it's quite comfortable to say that you are likely to recoup those points that week. And so it makes sense because you might take a -4 to get Phil Foden in, but he's playing potentially two full games against the two weakest defenses at home.
Yeah.
There's a really good chance that you just need to get more than 4 points off him basically, and that's it, or four more points than you would have got off your previous pick. And so, as a hypothetical, let's just say you were swapping him in for, I don't know, Madison playing like Arsenal away. To me, that feels like a reasonable transfer, and to take hits to do it,
Yeah.
to take a -4 to do it, because you're banking on the fact that Foden's going to score four more points with an extra fixture than Madison was away to Arsenal.
Yeah.
When he's good. So there are instances where it makes sense, and usually we'll come to those later on in the season because those are early on. It really doesn't make sense to do it. That's what I'm saying about having a bit of patience. Picks don't become awful overnight. You know, let's just say you pick Bukayo Saka. His first game of the season is Nottingham Forest at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I'm just trying to think to him now, but his next game of the season is he's got Crystal Palace away and then Fulham at home.
Yeah.
Let's just say hypothetically he doesn't do anything, not as Forest at home, even if they win 5-0. He
Yeah.
just doesn't. He's not the one who scored the points. That doesn't automatically make him a bad pick when he's playing Crystal Palace away the next week. It just means that you were unlucky. Gabby Jesus scored a hat trick instead. That's just how it goes. So a bit of patience really, and not trying to knee jerk players in and out
Yeah.
is what on that one. You've got to really think, what are the upcoming fixtures? Why did you pick him in the first place? And has anything significantly changed since you picked him? Only just that he got unlucky. Maybe not. So, I mean, this is the one I really struggle with. So this number one is like mine as well because I, although I plan ahead, things inevitably happen, and I go, oh yeah, I watched Fernandez and he should have scored two today and he didn't. Is there a better person I can take instead?
Yeah.
And I start thinking about it, even though he might be playing say, Luton at home the next game. So
Yeah.
that's number one, I would think, and that kind of leads us to number two. So taking picks as kind of a medium term as a general rule. So thinking between 4 to 8 games ahead and just
Yeah.
thinking of those fixtures and that run. And as I say, not trying to knee jerk them out if they blank one of them. So generally speaking, you have to think of it as season totals don't really matter when you're looking at players
Yeah.
because most of the time you only care about what they might score in the next few weeks. And
Okay.
then you might have a plan to get them out for someone else who's got where fixtures swing. So for example, Chelsea don't have very good opening fixtures for the first two, but from fixtures 3 through 9, they're really good. So you might say, I don't want to have Raheem Sterling in my team for week 1 and 2 because he's poor. But if you think about it realistically, you will want him from 3 through 9. So if you're thinking weeks 1 through 7 or 8 or 9, you want him in your team
Yeah.
because he's potentially nailed on to play with a Pochettino, and we know what he's been like before, as an example. So it's kind of more just planning ahead using fixtures and trying to roll transfers when you can and not use them early on to begin with. And because
Is there
things
a
are going to
limit
come
to
up.
how many you can roll up?
Yes, so the limit's 2.
Okay.
So every week you don't use it, it rolls, and then the maximum is 2 weeks in a row. After that, usually you may find that you don't want to make a transfer, but it's sometimes worth it just to change out one of your bench players for someone you found who's getting minutes just in case.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really know how best to explain that, but
Yeah. Well, it's a good indication that I've never let a transfer roll because I had no idea that it's limited to 2. I didn't even know it went to 2.
yeah, well, so this is where they actually become really important because if you're planning ahead for, say, later on in the season, you're looking at double game weeks or blank game weeks, i.e., Man City are playing in the FA Cup, so they're not playing a fixture that weekend, and you've got Erling Haaland in your team, for example, you might want to use, if you had no transfers, it means you're taking minus points to get someone out you knew wasn't going to play.
Yeah.
Whereas if you'd planned ahead a little bit, you might have 1 or 2 transfers for free to be able to make that switch and then switch them back again next week, the
Yeah.
week after. So it's things like this that just kind of thinking a little bit medium to longer term on the picks rather than 1 to 2, think 4 to 5 game weeks. Things change though because players get injured and various things happen. It'd be like, oh yeah, we think Martinelli's going to play 90 minutes every game. Well, I know he doesn't. Trossard starts and he plays like 20. So things like this that you maybe sometimes can't anticipate.
Foden's similar like that, isn't he?
Yeah,
City are one of the Pep's are so frustrating, isn't he? Because you never know
Pep
really.
roulette. Yeah,
I guess
Pep.
with the fact that he's lost, well, I would say considerably, and if Carl Walker goes as well, he's lost considerable amount of players that he hasn't really replaced at this point. So their squad might be a bit thinner. I doubt it will be. They'll pull a couple of 60, 70, 80 million deals out of nowhere, and they'll be absolute worldies like normal.
Yeah.
But hopefully that makes things a little bit easier for all of us. But picking City players, from my experience, which
Yeah.
is rubbish, is difficult.
I'm not going to assume that that'll make any difference. I'll
No,
give you a little hint into my team, and I'm thinking maybe next week we can go through this. But I've got Phil Foden in my current team
have you?
because I'm banking on the fact that Pep will fit him into the system, i.e., he'll either put him out on the right because Mahrez isn't there. He'll put him in as a number 8 alongside De Bruyne because Gundogan isn't there. He'll still get minutes because his
Yeah,
production is so good when he does actually play. It just hasn't been playing. So he's an example of someone I might want to take a risk on.
yeah, good
Um,
shout.
but that will come to that maybe another time on my actual team. So my number 3 tip is actually to try and use stats. I know you can find them anywhere really. You can find them on the Fantasy Football website if you wanted to, but there are lots of other places. You can just use Opta or somewhere like that, and you can get some good stats to give you an idea. So it's a kind of a quick way to analyze players. It's not something you want to just completely rely on all the time. There are some fantasy managers who rely only on stats. There are some who like use the eye test, i.e., they just watch players and say, "Oh, he looks like he's being brilliant and he's getting into the right positions, etc."
Yeah.
It's a good thing to quickly look at players that you haven't been able to see, because I mean you can't watch all Premier League games,
No.
especially if it's 3 o'clock on a Saturday. You know,
Yeah.
so there's a quick way to understand, and usually the best way to do is to make sure you apply some context. So what you want to be looking at is expected goals, expected assists for any forwards, and then expected goals conceded for, say, defenders. So,
Yeah.
for example, Man City expected goal conceded are going to be pretty low because they're just a phenomenal defense. So you know that Man City players are going to get more clean sheets than others, but there may be some things you didn't realize. So, like that Crystal Palace were a top 5 team defensively the back end of last season.
Yeah. No idea.
So you wouldn't know that unless you look at stats, but that gives you an idea. Then maybe a Crystal Palace defender isn't so bad. It's cheaper, allows you to make other moves, etc. in your team, and you're using stats just to give you an idea.
Does that coincide with Roy's tenure at the club, or re-tenure, or whatever the term is,
No,
where
that's
he
through the
came
whole.
back?
That's actually no, that's through the whole season. Sorry.
Okay. Right. Okay. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
So
Interesting.
I mean, I could be wrong, admittedly, on that one, but it was just as an example.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
The,
good
the,
shout.
the main thing you need to be careful of is sample sizes. So not to pick over the first few game weeks, for example. You need to kind of have a think. Sometimes using historic numbers are important. So previous seasons. So Heung-min Son might have had a bad season last year, but that doesn't mean he's going to have a bad one this year. Historically, he's been fantastic.
Do you know what?
Statistically, he's been.
He's always been a good player when Kane has him in there, and if that happens, he's going to become the
Yeah,
number one
potentially.
man, isn't he? Yeah.
I'm actually of the other line. I think that if Kane leaves, he actually makes it a worse option. But that's just because I think overall Spurs will be a worse team.
Oh yeah.
And the same therefore applies to fantasy. But yeah, that's it's a good thing to think about.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I'll give you an example. Okay, if you're looking for a £6 to £7 million midfielder for this season, who do you think? I mean, I know you don't know necessarily all the prices, but highest non-penalty expected goals as a statistic, who do you think was probably in there? I mean, there's a few,
Ooh.
but
Um, Odegaard, Martinelli, and Saka I can think of straight away.
yeah,
None of those take them. Oh, Saka does actually. Sorry, Saka does take penalties.
no, it's the statistics just more a case of what his expected goals are excluding penalties. So
Oh, okay.
obviously because
Who
Saka's
are
the
they?
penalty taker, for example.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Salah's a penalty taker, so it won't be him. De Bruyne is a penalty. So is he? No, De Bruyne has got to be up there then.
yeah, well, that's the thing. So Harvey Barnes was the highest non-penalty expected goals of anyone last season. So which for in that price range that I gave you. So 67 million pound as a midfielder in the game. You wouldn't normally think that, but that's just as an example of the kind of things that you can use. You can pull out gems using stats because you can
Yeah.
see that, say, if you looked at a lot of teams last year towards the back end of the season, a lot of people have had Eze in their team, Barry Eze in their team,
I'm just
partly
looking at mine
because,
now, and I've got Eze.
yeah, partly because he was doing really well for Palace, but mainly because statistically he was their biggest threat by a big margin.
Right.
And so if you're choosing between him and, say, Elise, who's also at Palace and they were doing just as well, even though they probably have quite similar outputs in the end, statistically speaking, Eze was the better pick and that's where you use stats, just
Yeah.
to give you an idea of one over the other. It's important to just apply some context though. So how many minutes are they getting? As Man City is a prime example of this. You can have someone who's really like Phil Foden, who has fantastic statistical data when he's on the field, but he doesn't play many minutes, so it's almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 4. I'm sorry, we're taking some time over this.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Try to. This is a weird one. Try to judge the decisions, not the outcome. I make the biggest mistakes half the time by looking at what's happened and then thinking it was a bad choice because they didn't score points. Or, I made a transfer, so I transferred in Eze as an example last season, and I thought, oh, he didn't score in the first 2 weeks I had him, therefore it's a bad pick. But sometimes you just get unlucky. You can't control what happens on the pitch. So, for example, I think Salah in the 9-0 win last season, I think they had at 9-0, didn't they?
Against Bournemouth, I was there. Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't score, did he not?
Do you know what he should have done as well? He
Yeah.
probably could have had a hat trick,
And
but
I'm like,
he missed some absolute sitters. And again,
so
you're right. That's somebody that you'd bank on, isn't it?
exactly. So he's the best decision was to get the best Liverpool attacking player in your fantasy team for one of the best fixtures, Bournemouth
Yeah.
away in this case. And it's like they win 9-0, and you're like, you go to look at your fantasy app and you think, oh, Salah must have scored a hat trick, and he doesn't. It's
Yeah.
depressing, but that doesn't mean it was a bad decision. It just
Yeah.
means the outcome was unfortunate. And then so that's always what to try and think, because it tests your patience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like all things. I mean, I play a lot of poker, but it's like that in some respects. There's an element of skill in the game. You make the decisions, but once they're made, you can't control it. You can't control the cards in poker, for example. You make the best decision you have with the information you have.
Yeah.
And so try not, again, it goes back to the whole not knee jerking and having patience, really, I'd say. But number 5, I have some general tips for building your squad for game week 1. So
Yeah.
the idea is to have really most players in your team should be guarantees, i.e., they're proven players, they've got good data, they've got good minutes, they've got good fixtures, and generally that's what you want to build most of your team around.
Yeah.
I would say 8 or 9 of those you would want at a minimum in your team. That means, for example, I know sometimes people go, oh, I want to go differential, i.e., pick someone who's not very highly owned. You don't want to go without Erling Haaland, for example.
No.
He needs to be there. Doesn't matter how expensive he is. He's just the best player.
Doesn't matter that everybody's got him, because
So
if you haven't got him, you're
yeah,
not getting points.
exactly. So the best thing is sometimes people want to fight against the crowd, but trust me, there's a time and a place to do that towards the back end of the season if you're trying to chase people in mini leagues, but the time is not to do it at the start. So that's why, unfortunately, a lot of the teams you'll see on social media, if you follow any FPL stuff there or you watch YouTube videos, they're going to have the same 8 or 9 players in the team.
Yeah.
It's the 2 or 3 outside that where you can have a bit of creativity and have a bit of think, use a bit of data, watch some pre-season if you take much notice of that, things like this, and just get an idea. So I'm, as an example, Bukayo Saka's in my team. He's going to be there for a fact. There's no way he's not going to be there. Erling Haaland's there. I've got a Manchester United attacker, so either Rashford or Fernandes. I'm going to have Gabriel or someone like Estepinian at the back, almost
Yeah.
guarantee, things like this. So they're just guarantees. I don't know about you as an Arsenal fan, you'll have to tell me, but I think Gabriel, for example, for his price, he's nailed. He's going to play 90 minutes every week without fail, and they've got a really good defence.
Yeah,
I
I
assume
would
he's therefore a good
say
pick.
that Saliba is more of a nailed. I think Timber brings in a bit of a different what's the
Yeah,
term? A different
maybe.
aspect, but a potential different option. Definitely a very good
Yeah.
option.
I just assumed naively that Gabriel's a left footer. He's going to play left centre back,
Yeah,
and
I
they
think
don't
you're
have another
probably right.
left sided centre back, and so
I think you're probably right.
that Arteta wants a left footed one, so he's going to stay. Estupinian, really attacking player in a good Brighton side, going to play almost all the time. There'll be some minutes he comes off, but the same deal there. Luke Shaw, I've got in the team.
Yeah.
Again, nailed on, just all the time. He's really good for attacking threat, and of course, Manchester United defence isn't too bad. I mean, they did win the Golden Glove last season, most clean sheets. As I said about Saka, Rashford, I've got in now. I've got Martinelli in there at the moment, although he's an iffy one. But people like this are going to be the heart of your team to start. And I wouldn't go too differential. It's things like picking Foden versus Madison,
Yeah.
as an example, or I don't know, picking Onana for Manchester United in goal and not having Luke Shaw in the team and choosing a different defender. So things like that, they're going to make the small differences, but for the most part, you don't want to deviate too massive from the template,
Yeah.
because inevitably you end up falling behind at the start. Not always, but there's a bigger chance of you falling behind than there is gaining the massive advantage
Yeah.
throughout the season, because you have to think that there's going to have to be some flexibility in that. So you want to pick players that are easy to transfer to someone else if someone else emerges. So I've got Nkunku currently in the team, unbelievably, but that could just be just as easily Gabriel Jesus. But as an example, he's, because of his price, if Ollie Watkins ends up smashing it and he gets in his fixtures get good, I could quickly with one transfer move from Nkunku to Ollie Watkins because
Yeah.
they're roughly the same price. And so that's another thing to mention, is to try and keep it flexible and think about what price the player is, not necessarily who it is to begin with.
Yeah.
So at the back, I've got two £5 million defenders and a £5.5 million defender. That's
Yeah.
deliberate because I know that if, for example, Gabriel is not the option for Arsenal, I can pivot to any other defender in the Arsenal team, most likely, but also anyone who emerges. Just hypothetically say that Ben Chilwell or Reece James end up smashing it for Chelsea. So I could
Yeah.
easily move to one of them. So it's about trying to build around the price rather than the player to begin with.
Yeah.
If sorry to ramble, but have another example. So Trent, most expensive defender in the game. I don't have him, but I know that if I had him, I'd be more flexible because I know that if for any reason I wanted to transfer him out and get anyone else in, I only have to do one transfer. Because he's the most expensive defender in the game, I can go to any other defender in the game in just one move.
Right. Yeah, it
Whereas
makes
if
absolute
it,
sense. Yeah.
yeah,
Being the
whereas if
most
it was the other way
expensive, you can
around,
afford anybody.
yeah. So if I picked someone who was like a £4 million defender and I had too many of them, like a couple, it's not very flexible because I can't then. I'd have to think about downgrading another position in order to get someone better in,
Yeah.
and then that takes two transfers, yeah, etc. So that's really where I start when I build. And again, it's about thinking weeks ahead, trying to limit the number of punts you take, differentials you have in your team. But ultimately, it's up to you. You try to limit the kind of transfers you need or you're thinking of making at the start because things can go wrong. But ultimately, it's about having fun. I, don't-
Yeah.
I mean, I talk about this for 20 minutes or something, but it really it's because I overthink it. Ultimately, it's up to everyone else to kind of choose who they want to choose and go with it. If they think that Martin Odegaard's going to be the best player in the league by some margin, put him in the team. Don't
Yeah.
don't hesitate, just do it. If you think for whatever fantastical reason that Erling Haaland's not going to score 20 goals this season, and you want Harry Kane because he's going to smash it and stay at Spurs, then put Harry Kane in the team. You don't have to. But generally, those are the rules of thumb. I hope that was concise
Oh,
enough
mate,
in the
it's
end.
yeah, absolutely. It's so helpful, and I think each week, inevitably, as it goes on, we're gonna look back and look at decisions that may have cost us, and decisions that have come off that we've both made, and I think pretty much anybody that we get on is likely to be playing it as well as a guest, so we can talk it through with them and see how seriously they take it. I think I've always wanted to take it seriously, but I think there's a level of my attention span halfway through the season. I've used two of my tokens straight away, and I've got bored and made a wholesale change and things like that, and no, that cost me. But this season, I really want to give it a fair crack and give it a good go because I think I can do it. But yeah, mate, that was bang on, and I think we've said plenty. I think what we'll do is we'll get this out to the masses, the people that are waiting, banging down the doors, waiting to listen to us talk a load of rubbish for an hour. I think we'll get this edited up and get it out. I think we're both playing football tonight as well, aren't we? So we'll
Yeah,
we'll see each
indeed.
other working out the teams just after this. So I haven't decided yet whether we'll be on the same team or not. We'll make that decision. But it's always good fun. And thanks for your time. Thank you very much for everybody for
Yeah, no
listening.
worries.
And it's been great. And we will speak to you all and see you all next week.
Thank you very much.
Top man. Thank you.